Good morning and warm welcome to our webinar. I hope everyone is doing well. I'm Ashraf, the MCC Public Affairs and Government Relations Officer, and I will be your MC today. Welcome to Solving the Tax Technology Puzzle of e-Invoicing, developed in collaboration with EY and co-organized by the British Malaysian Chamber of Commerce, BMCC, and the American Malaysian Chamber of Commerce, AmCham. Now, to kick off today's program, we have a message from Ms. Jennifer Lopez, Chief Executive Officer of BMCC. Unfortunately, Jennifer couldn't join the session today, but she did leave a short message. Let's hear from Jennifer.
Hi everyone, a very good morning to all of you, especially to Dato' Rashida, the Director of Operations of Policy Session IRB, Amarjit Singh, EY ASEAN Tax Leader, Shoban, the CEO of AmCham. Ladies and gentlemen, a warm welcome to our webinar on e-invoicing this morning. E-invoicing is definitely a buzzword among businesses ever since the Malaysian government announced the implementation. Hence, we are so glad to work together with EY as subject matter experts, as well as with the support of AmCham to bring you this program. We at the Chamber, we commend the Malaysian government on this move, as we trust that it augurs well with the nation's agenda on digitalisation and sustainability. And importantly, e-invoicing is a powerful tool for transparency and efficiency in tax administration. While Malaysia is on the right track, we do recognize the challenges that will arise on the implementation of e-invoicing. Hence, the Chamber aims through our collaborative efforts and leveraging on a wide network to facilitate the seamless integration of e-invoicing among businesses, especially our members. Our effort does not stop with this webinar. We would like to support you in your journey in this implementation process. So hence, I seek your feedback or views and how the Chamber can assist you further in this journey. So do reach out to us at the BMCC. So with that, I wish you all an insightful session. Thank you.
Now, I would like to invite Ms. Shoban Das, the Chief Executive Officer of the American Malaysian Chamber of Commerce, AmCham, to deliver her welcoming remarks. Over to you, Ms. Shoban.
Thank you very much, Ashraf, and thank you very much to EY and BMCC for hosting this webinar. I think it's a very important webinar to be having, and I really appreciate the collaboration that chambers have in addressing what Jennifer just described as a very important part of Malaysia's journey to be a digitized nation. In a recent survey that we had, we noticed that our members are almost 60% are already digitized or approaching the digitalization of e-invoicing and well on their way to making this happen. We are very grateful for these webinars and for the work that's going to be going forth with IRB, and we're very grateful to the time that Dr. Rashida and her team have spent with AmCham and will continue to spend with the chambers as we work through for a positive and smooth implementation throughout the rest of the year. So I just want to say, echo Jennifer's message of collaboration and also of feedback. We can only be as strong as your feedback is to us, and be able to represent you to the government and to especially this project, which is important, so we understand the various different business models that are impacted in different ways. So thank you very much once again, and I really do hope that you have a fantastic webinar today, and the collaboration and the inputs from all of you continue to come into both BMCC and to AmCham. We are all standing here ready to make this a smooth and effective process. So thank you once again, and enjoy for the rest of the morning. Back to you, Asha.
Thank you very much, Shoban. Next, I would like to invite Mr. Amarjit Singh, EY ASEAN Tax Leader, to deliver his speech on the overview of e-invoicing. Mr. Amarjit Singh leads EY ASEAN Tax and has more than 28 years of professional experience in taxation. Over to you, Mr. Amarjit.
Thank you, Ashraf. Very good morning to everyone. Thank you for taking out your time So a couple of things for me. I've got 10 minutes just to do a quick overview before I really pass on to the experts. So first, thank you, BMCC. Thank you, MCHEM, for giving us this opportunity to spend some time with your esteemed members to share the developments on e-invoicing. Quite a fair bit of ground has been covered in this space. Number two, I also want to thank Dr. Rashida, notwithstanding how busy she is, taking on time to be with us this morning and giving all of us a sort of a first-hand update on how the e-invoicing is progressing. And a special mention on Shovan. I think, Shovan, you are out of the country and yet took out the time today. So a million thanks for joining us this morning. So firstly, very quickly, a background to the e-invoicing. The announcement came early last year, and things are progressing, I would say, well. There's always here and there pressures and I guess hiccups, but up to now with the Inland Revenue Board, I think is doing a fantastic job. There's guidelines have been issued. There have been numerous engagements between the Inland Revenue directly with the industry players, various different industries. I know firsthand, through some of our own clients, there are also one-on-one client engagements. So the team in the Inland Revenue Board, I think, is really busy, but wanting to make sure that all information that is necessary for our taxpayers to have to be ready for invoicing come 1st August is in play. The much awaited SDK was announced earlier, a couple of weeks back, so that is out as well. The pilot plan is on the way. We're looking at opening the Inland Revenue Board opening up for pilot in May. So as far as the I guess from an outside in view, it sounds and it appears very clearly all systems go come 1st August. Now, and maybe let me pivot to give you a little bit of overview of e-invoicing and how and how you should take into account some of this information in terms of the strategy that I guess you need to adopt in regards to not just Malaysia, but you have presence not just in Malaysia. I'm sure you have presence outside. How can we, or how can you look at it holistically? So the first point I want to make is this is not a Malaysia thing. In fact, it's a global trend. The invoicing perhaps started with the LATAM area, countries like Mexico, Colombia, Egypt, Brazil probably started the trend of digitizing the tax administration, and their main aim or goal was predominantly reducing the tax leakages and having a better grips of tax collection to be done in a sort of cost-effective manner. Now that trend quickly got replicated in many parts of the world. Today, on average, we've got more than 40 jurisdictions that are already on their path to digitize the tax administration, and one key fundamental step towards that is the e-invoicing, and then subsequently followed by e-reporting. Today, the trend is not just with the emerging markets. We have France getting on board. We know of Japan and Singapore within the Asia Pac, and also Australia. Now, some of these jurisdictions, the main aim is really about curbing the tax leakages. And some of this jurisdiction is really about digitalization of the economy and the administration as a whole, to make the whole process of tax compliance be seamless, automatic, as possible. Yeah. So that's in terms of the trend. But the one thing to note, I think, on e-invoicing is there is no one clear definition on e-invoicing. Each jurisdiction has its own definition. I learned, much earlier that, although we use the word e-invoicing, it's not really meant to limit the coverage to be just on the invoices. In countries in LATAM, even the payroll is included. So the first point to note is there is no one standard version of the invoicing. Malaysia, I think, has had the benefit of learning from the other markets. So our going in position is a bit more holistic, a little bit more comprehensive. Although we are just starting off with invoicing, credit notes, debit notes, but I'm sure in years to come that embed or that spectrum will be wider. So the first point to note, I think, as you think about implementing invoicing, there is no one standard definition, because you have presence not just in Malaysia. And I think as a group, you represent companies that operate beyond a particular border. And my observation is there is usually the preference to have one standard format, one standard way of doing things. So you need to be mindful that is not, e-invoicing in Indonesia. So in ASEAN, we have e-invoicing implemented in Indonesia, in Vietnam, for a number of years now. Philippines was supposed to go live with the last taxpayers January last year. Now, looking at some of the developments, they put it on hold. What we know is they are going back to the storyboard and looking at revising their approach to e-invoicing. So, give them some time, and I'm sure they will come out again and be hooked to the e-invoicing platform as well. So that's my first point, which is no clear interpretation or no clear definition of e-invoicing. Each country has its own version. Number two, the regulation, as we learn from the other markets, as we learn from LATAM, as we learned from some of the developed countries, as we learn from some of the jurisdictions in EU, you will see changes coming. So today, and I'm not implying that Malaysia will do, but just as an example, today we have, for example, 50 odd fields for the invoice or the transaction to be sent to the Malaysian Internet Board. We know in some of these jurisdictions, for example, Poland, that was originally supposed to implement invoice this year, now it's postponed, was looking at 400 fields. Some of the other jurisdictions in LATAM have between 200 to 400 fields. India has about 130. So things will change. It is not constant. It is not, we get in today and it is expected to be the same. So you need to be mindful of that. So no clear one interpretation. And number two, consistent state. So these are the things that I think you need to look into and take into account as you formulate your strategy, your approach to handling the e-invoicing implementation. So are you looking at just Malaysia? Do you have presence outside of Malaysia? Do you need one standard solution? And these are some of the questions that you need to look into. Are you looking at building things by yourself, or getting a third-party service provider that basically takes care of the compliance to invoicing across the globe? Is it purely a tax requirement that you want to appease the Inland Revenue in terms of meeting the compliance regulations, or is this an opportunity for you to review how your processes are put in place, and is it possible for you to then review, reassess, and perhaps take the opportunity to make things even more efficient in-house? So these are some of the considerations that I'm just rattling off on the top of my head here. But as you formulate your strategy, I think these are some of the questions that you need answered. Hence, The objective of and the way we've planned the session today is really to, number one, I think, get a latest update from the Inland Revenue Board directly with Dr. Rashida. And then we'll have a session with, the speakers from EY, Adrian, Derek, and Julian on some of the technology consideration. Now, we've been working on this way before even the announcement was made. There's a fair amount of experience that we've gained in that process. Today, on this session, we're not having some of our colleagues from overseas, but we've been working very closely with our colleagues from the LATAM side of Hawaii, Mexico, and Brazil. We've also been working with our colleagues in India to learn from them, learn from their experiences on what works, what doesn't work. And so between Adrian, Julian, and Derek, they will share that with you as much as they have, so that it helps you think through some of the consideration that you need to have in place as you embark on your journey. And we will also then cover some of the key technical tax or finance consideration that you need to think about as you implement the e-invoicing for yourself. Now, my last point before I hand it back to Ashraf is please stay until the end of this session. There's a little bit of a sweetener, or there's a little bit of a gift offer that we want to put across and share to all of you. But I will only do that when I come back for the closing at the end of the session. So stay tuned. Ask your questions, even if we can't address it in this webinar. We'll find an opportunity to do it elsewhere. And once again, thank you MCHAM, thank you BMCC, thank you Inland Revenue Board for being here today and for giving us this opportunity. With that, I pass it back to Ashraf.
Thank you very much, Mr. Marjid. Now, ladies and gentlemen, now let's dive to our panel session where we'll be discussing the latest updates on the e-invoicing landscape in Malaysia. I'm honored to welcome Dr. Rashida Cik Rosli, Director of Operations, Policy Section, Tax Operations Department, Inland Revenue Board of Malaysia, to share her insights with us. Over to you, Dr. Rashida.
Okay, thank you so much, Ashraf. I also would like to take this opportunity to thanks very much to Jennifer, the British Malaysian Chamber of Commerce, and also in collaboration with EY, Mr. Marjid, and also Ms. Ribon, American Malaysia Chamber of Commerce, for giving me this opportunity to share the latest updates through this webinar today. So based on the topic, I'll present an updates on the Malaysia invoicing landscape. It is based on most recent LHN updates. So just to share with all of you, in every engagement session that we had with the industry players and also the taxpayer, we always emphasize on the e-invoice implementation focus, as well as the government objective of implementing this e-invoice for the benefit of the taxpayer. So just to recap again, the objective of these implementations, of course, is in line with the Malaysian 12 plans, which is focused on increasing the digital services and also digitizing the tax administration as well. So these digitalizations can lead to the measures, operations, financials, and also the economic benefit, which is promoting the economic growth and also the sustainability. So this initiative will also improve the overall taxpayer experience in complying with the tax obligations and also in accordance with the compliance by design concept. So this e-invoice is actually applies to all the taxpayers who conduct the businesses or undertaking the commercial activities in Malaysia. So in terms of the implementations, IRB implement this continuous transaction control model, CTC model, which provide high-level control to the validations of this e-invoice data that received by IRB. So the e-invoice will allow for the real-time transactions, validations, and also the storage, which it includes the transaction from the business to business, B2B, business to consumer, B2C, and also business to government. So I'm sure that the audience today are already aware regarding our e-invoice workflow. Just to recap, in order to facilitate the taxpayer transition to this e-invoice, LSDN has developed two e-invoice transition mechanism, which is first one is the portal, this My Invoice portal, which is hosted by LSDN, and the other one is through the application programming interface API. So we always advise that it is important for the taxpayer to select the most suitable mechanism in order for them to transmit this e-invoice to LSDN based on their specific needs and also the business requirement as well. So the first one is this My Invoice portal. It's actually this portal is open to all the taxpayer with no cost for them to transmit this e-invoice for the purpose of the validation. And of course, this My Invoice portal will contain all the functionalities that require for the taxpayer to perform their e-invoice obligations. And the second one is through the API, which is it is a set programming code that allow the taxpayer to submit e-invoice directly to the LSGN. So basically, this is an overview of this e-invoice workflow. Just to give an explanations on every steps and also the functions of this e-invoice workflow, which is the step one is actually for the e-invoice issuance. There are two mechanisms, which is My Invoice portal and also the API. So through the My Invoice portals, there are also two options. So taxpayer can create the e-invoice individually by input all the required fields that we issue through the guidelines, or they also can generate a certain amount of e-invoice in batches by uploading a file to the portal, which is containing a necessary e-invoice information with the format that we set. And through the API, essentially taxpayer can have a direct integration from the ERP system or through the technology provider, which is it creates e-invoice in accordance with the defined UBL 2.1 structure in the format of XML or JSON and submit to LSGN through the API for the validation. So once validated, the supplier or through the intermediaries technology provider, they will receive notifications or API response with the informations, the IRB unique identifier number. They also will receive the date and time of the validation and also the validation link as well. So we will notify both the supplier and buyer through the email and also the My Invoice portal. So once validated, the supplier is actually responsible to share the validated e-invoice with the buyer after embedding the validated link in the form of the QR code on the e-invoice. So this QR code is actually used to validate the existence and also the status of this e-invoice through the My Invoice portal. And the next step is supplier or buyer are allowed to cancel or request for rejections within 72 hours from the time of the validation. So all e-invoice that submitted to the LHDN will be stored in our database. We also always remind the taxpayer to retain the sufficient record and also the documentation in relation to the current legislations regarding this transaction. So both supplier and buyer, we also have an option to request and also retrieve this e-invoice in the format of that we stated through the guideline as well. So as the topic is to share the latest update, I will share the summary of the updates, which is LHDN or RB has updated the e-invoice general guidelines version 2.0. Version 2.2, which is we issued on 9 February 2024, and it replaced the earlier version 2.1 that was issued on 28 October 2023. So in order to assist the taxpayer as well, and for them to monitor any changes that made by the IRB. We also provide the summary of changes as stated through the guideline. So I'll go through the changes that we made through the general guideline first, which is version 2.2, just to highlight the important changes. The other changes is more like the editorial changes and also some of the clarification. So we go first to item 1.5. It is regarding the transition period. Because as IRB, we receive a lot of questions from the taxpayer. Like for example, is the buyer responsibility to determine whether the supplier should issue an e-invoice or not? So as the compliant obligations of issuing the invoice is with the supplier, or in some cases the buyer, in the case of the self-bill e-invoice. So taxpayer may receive either a normal receipt if the supplier has yet to implement this invoice in accordance with the implementation timeline, or validated invoice during the transition period until the full implementation is in place. And the next one is the changes in the item 1.6.1. It is assumption from issuing e-invoice. So we add the points, which is the individual who are not conducting businesses are currently exempt from issuing this e-invoice until further changes or further announcement. And the next one regarding the TIN number, the tax identification number for the government, because currently the through the guideline as well, the government, the state government, and also the state authority, the government authority, local authority, and so on, are exempt in issuing this e-invoice. So in relation to the transactions with those authority, with the government, supplier are allowed to input the buyer TIN as a general TIN, but specific for the government. So you can see from the guidelines is actually we add the EI0040 for them to input through the for every transactions made for the regarding the government. And the next one, changes to the item 2.3.2, which is regarding the accuracy of the information submitted to LHDN. Another issue that came up during the engagement session as well is what happened if the supplier provided the incorrect or inaccurate transaction information. So as a result, we update the guidelines to state that the supplier is responsible to ensure the accuracy of the information which is included in this e-invoice that sent to LHDN for the valuation to the extent possible. And the next one is changes to item 2.3 until 2.3.7 and 2.4.5. It is related to the visual representation. Regarding to the issuance of this e-invoice using this My Invoice portal. So once validated, the suppliers actually will receive a validated e-invoice as well as visual representation of the validated invoice in PDF from the LHDN through the My Invoice portal. So these visual representations of this invoice generated from the My Invoice portal will include together with the QR code, which can be used to validate the existence and also the status of this e-invoice through the My Invoice portal. And the next one is the changes to the item 2.3.2 regarding the 72 hours cancellations or request for rejection. It is also another issue that also always been raised by the taxpayer regarding the time frame for the for cancels the invoice or cancellation of invoice or request for these rejections, because the risk that the request for rejections is the 72 hours time frame is actually provide to the seller or buyer to raise to cancel or request for rejections for the convenience of the supplier and buyer. So in the events where the supplier does not want to use the cancellation or rejection functions, any adjustment is actually back to the current business arrangement, which can be made through the issuance of the credit note or debit note or refund note e-invoice. And the next one is regarding the changes to the item 2.4 related to the API integrations and also configuration. So we update our guidelines. We stated that this SDK, the software development kit, released on 9 February 2024, includes the API integrations and configurations documentation as well as the API endpoint. So these API formats for the e-invoice submissions will follow the data structure of the Universal Business Language version 2.1 UBL 2.1. So I'm sure that after this, the detail will be explained through the presentations, through the next presentations as well. So the next one is regarding the update to the data field of the e-invoice. We have made some adjustments, amendment through the data fields of this e-invoice. So in order to ensure that this data field follow the data structure of the UBL 2.1, we updated based on the previous 2.1 version, which is the date and time of the validation, and also the IRB unique identifier number is not considered as a data field since it is provided by LHCN upon the validation. So the additional data field that we include the total payable amount. It is a mandatory field, which is sum of the amount payable, which is inclusive of the total tax chargeable, excluding any amount paid in advance and any rounding adjustment, which is this one is applicable at the invoice level. So the other additional data piece is categorized as the optional, which is a total net amount, rounding amount, the total taxable amount per tax type, fee or charge rate, fee or charge amount. Okay, the next one is the additional key area, which is we provide to the e-invoice specific guidelines version 2.0. We issue on 9 February 2024, which is together with the updated general guidelines and also the SDK. Generally, the key area that being updated are the e-invoice treatment for the interest payment, the further clarifications on the areas which is include the e-invoice specific guidelines, and also the removal of the certain area from this e-invoice specific guideline as well. So I'll go through the changes, which is the for item 3.4.5.4, which is the tax identification number for Malaysian and also the foreigner. So for the update, IRB provide more details regarding the TIN and also the identification number for the Malaysian and also the Malaysian, where we include that for Malaysian individual, identification number, it can be either my card number or my tentera, because some of them have the my tentera, or for the non-Malaysian individual, the identification number can be either the passport number or my PR or my CAS, whichever applicable for them. And to provide clarity, for non-Malaysian TIN number, it's actually referred to the TIN assigned by IRB, which is in the event of the non-individuals does not have the TIN, the supplier may use the general TIN, which we specified in the specific guidelines, along with the passport number or my PR or my CAS identification number of the state individual. And the next one is regarding the changes for item 3.6, which is regarding the consolidated e-invoice, which is for consolidated invoice. The IRB is actually allow the supplier to adopt one or combination of the method that we stated, which is taxpayer can issue the consolidated invoice in the summary of each receipt presented as a separate line item in the consolidated invoice, or the list of receipt in a continuous receipt number, which is presented as a line item, where if there is a break of the receipt number change, it should be the next change included as a new line item. So it is also up to the taxpayer whether they want to report to issue the consolidated invoice based on the each branch or locations and submit it for the purpose of the validation. And the next one is regarding the changes for item 9.4.1, which is the transactions which involve the payment to include the sentence whether in monetary form or otherwise to the ADD, to the agent, dealer or the distributor. So the updated rephrase the sentence of the issuance of the self-bill e-invoice from the seller to the ADD, which is upon concluding the sales of the transaction, the ADD is eligible to receive a payment or any incentive, whether in monetary or otherwise from the seller. And the next changes is item 10.4.8 and also 0.9, which is regarding the timing of the self-bill issuance, where we stated that in relation of the importation of goods, the Malaysia purchaser should issue a self-bill e-invoice upon obtaining the custom clearance. And in relation to the importation of services, the self-bill e-invoice should be issued upon either payment made by the Malaysian purchaser or receipt of e-invoice from the foreign supplier, whichever earlier. And so the next slide is the overview of the specific guidelines, which is I'm not going to present every transaction, just to highlight the updated through the specific guideline as well, which is to recap the trade in the certain circumstances where another party other than supplier we allow to assume the role of issuing and issue a self-bill or invoice on behalf of supplier. So we add on two more items to the self-bill e-invoice, which is the payment of credit to taxpayer recorded in the statement or bill issue on a periodic basis. Another one is the interest payment. So in this case, the taxpayer who made the interest payment will issue the self-bill e-invoice. And another section that we include through this specific guideline is regarding the e-commerce transactions, which is this e-commerce transaction can be happen between the various parties, including the enterprise, household, individual governments, and also other public or private organization as well. So currently, this e-invoice platform provided will issue an invoice or any document to the purchaser to record the transactions that is concluded through the e-commerce platform. So upon the implementation of this e-invoice platform providers are responsible to issue e-invoice upon the purchaser request or the receipt if there is no e-invoice is requested by the purchaser to the purchaser for the state transaction. So there are two scenarios. There is two transaction, which is the issuing of the self-bill e-invoice by the e-invoice platform provider to the merchants and or service provider, which is this e-commerce platform provider is required to issue the self-e-invoice to the merchants or service provider for all the transactions concluded on the e-commerce platform. And the e-commerce platform provider is also required to issue e-invoice to merchant and or service provider for the charges imposed to merchants and a service provider for the use of platform. So I will not go through the details, the other explanation as well, because through this slide presentation, we also have a industry specific FAQ in which to assist the taxpayer to provide the additional explanations based on the industry that address a specific area and also the challenges that encountered by the industry, resulting in sharing the understandings among the industry player and serving as a guidance for the implementation. So I think that's all from my presentation. So we also have our key avenue. So you feel free to access our microsites to access the guidelines and specific guidelines, and also the software development kit that we provide to our microsite. So back to you, Ashraf. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rashida, for the insightful presentation. Now let's move on to our next topic, the technology options and global tax e-invoicing solution, GTES. I would like now to invite Mr. Adrian Lim, Technology Consulting Partner, Mr. Julian Wong, EY ASEAN Global Compliance and Reporting Leader, and Mr. Derek Chan, Associate Partner, International Tax and Transaction Services from EY, who will be presenting. Over to you, Mr. Julian.
Thank you so much, Ashraf. Good morning, everybody, and it's a real pleasure to be here today to talk about e-invoicing and technology. I guess maybe the first point I would say is it's very easy to underestimate the scale and complexity of e-invoicing. That really applies, from really understanding the various guidelines, the impact on your business processes that Dr. Rashida just gave an update on, to really the technology side, which is what we will cover. So in terms of the next sort of 40-45 minutes, what I will do is to get Adrian to just give us some highlights on the SDK that was also released on February recently. I will then talk a little bit about, kind of the lessons learned from other markets where invoicing has been implemented in Saudi and in India. And then I would let Derek give a bit of a demo on a e-invoicing solution that we in EY are basically trying to implement. It is not the only solution in the market, but think about the functionality. Functionality is very important in terms of the tool that you are going to adopt, and really moving forward, the day one operational model that you want to implement, right? So maybe with that, Adrian, can I turn it to you to give us some updates on the SDK?
Thanks, Julian. So I think, again, there has been a lot of interest in SDK, right? And again, on, Chinese New Year reunion dinner, they did publish the SDK. And I was just going through the Q&A questions. Now, I think just a couple of key points are, right? The SDK is really for either your IT department or either your service integrator or even your third-party solution provider to be able to understand how to connect to LHDN system in real time, right? What does it really mean, and what's the opportunity, right? So if you go to the LHDN microsite where they've published the SDK, what you can understand from there is the expectation of the format of how you send data to LHDN, right? And the good news is really that if you read through the SDK, it says that it's based on UBL 2.1, which is an open standard, right? The second thing that LHDN has done inside the SDK, it says it supports XML or JSON message format, which is also great because that's also another open standard, right? So I think the first key point about the SDK is that it is not proprietary, right? LHDN has thoughtfully decided to adopt technologies that are open in nature, right? This reduces the complexity of proprietary system. So that's the first part, right? The standards. The second part that it then goes through, it then publishes APIs, right? APIs are basically, think about it as application programming interface, but think about it as pieces of code, right? That you can orchestrate to build your business workflow. So in the SDK, you will see the APIs that have been published. So for example, how do I log in to LHDN securely, right? What API do I call to submit a debit note, a credit note, and invoice, right? What API do I call to retrieve a document or to search for particular documents that are submitted to LHDN? Now, really, what will happen next is that then your IT department, your service integrator, or even third-party software developers, right? In this case, even EY, we will take these individual APIs or building blocks and build an end-to-end workflow to drive digitalization and automation, right? Now, then what do we need to worry about? So I think I like what Julian said, right? We might have underestimated the complexity of it, right? But I like to look at it as what is the opportunity for you as a company? You could use the most basic APIs to just submit the information to LDM for compliance purpose. Or you can integrate the APIs in the SDK to again digitalize your end-to-end operations. And I think later Derek will demo GTES about what are the value-add services that GTES provides in addition to compliance, right? I was just again going through the notes. Are there going to be continuous improvement to the SDK? The short answer is definitely, right? So again, based on the capabilities required by the industry, and hence why your feedback is so important, LHDN would take that as input and again, publish more and more capabilities to again help you digitalize your tax operations. Okay, Julian, that's it for me, right? I give my last word advice, just keep checking back the LHDN website, because I think as and when they update the SDK, the information will be published there. Thanks, Julian.
Thanks so much, Adrian. I guess we have to stay tuned. So let me turn on to the next slide right now. Really, I think maybe from a practitioner standpoint, I'm not a technology person, I'm a tax person, but looking at this from a functionality and an approach, a strategic approach standpoint, there are a couple of things you need to really bear in mind as you approach this from a tax and a technology standpoint, right? First is really on, kind of the data quality that you have. Do you have the data? What's the quality of the data and what's the format of the data? I think it's really important because the SDK sets out, what formats the data needs to be in. And before the information you send goes to the IRB, it needs to be in the right format. And so really, these aspects are very important and detail of that is very important when it comes to that aspect, all right? The second thing here is really on, kind of what's your business model, what are your processes that are impacted, and then how are you going to make changes to these processes? Because the technology solution that you put in place will really depend on kind of you having finalized processes, right? And any SI or technology provider will say, how do you want it? You tell me how you want it, and then I'll get it done. Which means you really need to understand the first part, which is really about your affected processes and really how you're going to make those changes, right? The second key thing, and this is what we see in corporate Malaysia, is there are different systems and ERP involved, and data is kind of kept all over the place. And the problem with this is it works for specific outputs that you want to achieve. But in invoice, where you need to consolidate the data before it gets sent over to the IRB, that becomes a bit of a problem, right? And lastly, many of our clients now are going through an upgrade cycle to, say, SAP S4, all right, from ECC or older systems. So I think we need to bear in mind this timing and when it's going to happen, because what you don't want to do is to kind of integrate using an old system. Maybe a few months later, you need to update to the new one. So these are some considerations you need to think about. Going over to the right-hand side, in terms of kind of your options for integrating with the IRB, really there are three broad, kind of categories. The first is really looking at your ERP vendors. If you're on Microsoft, you're on SAP, what are they coming up with to integrate with the IRB, right? So they are coming up with their own middleware and solutions to do so. And the good news about that is really it will work on your ERP, it will work with existing functionality you will have. Kind of the data security is pretty good. There will be seamless integration, so you don't have to worry about integrating with another system. And the updates will be provided by the ERP provider, right? The downside, of course, to rely on your ERP provider is what if you have different ERPs out there? Are you going to have different ERPs for different solutions for different ERPs that you have, right? Second thing, of course, which you have to bear in mind is the implementation and maintenance costs, because some of these providers are not cheap. And lastly, if you're depending on your ERP vendor to come up with a solution, you will be in a way dependent on them in terms of timing of when updates are coming out, in terms of how much customization you can do on a solution and so forth. So that's broadly kind of the ERP vendor approach, and then the pros and cons, right? Next we have what I call kind of specialized vendors. There are quite a few tools out there, local tools. There are also many kind of international ones, but they're all basically middleware, which means that they are ERP agnostic. They're able to kind of integrate and connect different systems together, right? And the additional benefit of some of these vendors is that some of them focus on, say, payments or so forth. So e-invoicing is part of their suite of kind of payment tools and solutions. For us, EY, our tool is kind of more tax specific, and to cater to future changes in what the IRB and customs may come up with in the future, right? So I think you need to understand not just the functionality for e-invoicing, but kind of the kind of the purpose and the evolution of the tool, and where where the service provider wants to take the tool, right? In terms of benefits, middleware, as I've said, it's able to cater to different ERP and systems. You're able to consolidate and then kind of do some changes to the data before sending it to the IRB, right? It's a service model, which means that most times the model is that you pay on an annual basis. Updates by the ERB from the IRB, the service provider would take care of it on the IRB side. There may need to be some changes depending on what the data fields are on your side to sort of connect to the middleware, right? And most importantly, a lot of this middleware is a lot more flexible, and it's able to be customized to local requirements, new sort of new functionality or requirements coming in from the IRB, right? Again, kind of limitation, of course, it's these things are not cheap to implement. There may be yearly kind of implementation costs, and depending on systems, some systems may have very little data coming out of it, right? So what do? Do you want to spend all this money to integrate everything, or is there another way of getting the data out, connecting it to IRB? I'll talk a bit about extraction and integration of data in a minute, but the key thing here is kind of data formats, right? How do you get the data out? Where do you connect to? That's a mapping exercise. And then, kind of transformation of the data, right? If it's not in the right format. And again, there is a dependency on your service provider in terms of, when the updates and all that can be done, right? Or when the system is down, what happens then? Because if you can't send an invoice, does that mean that you also can't get invoices to your customers, right? And thirdly is what I call a custom bill, which is really using your existing ERP and functionality of that to build a direct connection with the IRB system. This is a bill, so there is a one-off kind of a capital cost to build it, and you get to customize it the way you want it. You get full control of the integration. But the downside, of course, is if the IRB keeps changing their requirements, as you can see from the SDK and some of the data fields, that has already changed even the few months that we've had, sort of introduced or about to introduce e-invoicing, right? So when things get changed over on the IRB side, there will be a maintenance on your side that you need to do, maybe on both sides, because you need to maintain it on the IRB side. You also need to kind of maintain it on your side of the fence, right? So I think the key thing here about the custom bill is the fact that you are internalizing your risk. Your service provider would say, yes, it works. You do testing, it works. But what happens about maintenance and ownership of the custom bill moving forward, right? So how are you going to manage that risk? So that's just the kind of the broad technology approaches and what we're seeing in the market. And my next slide is really about kind of the lessons learned, right? And we've had the benefit of speaking to some of our colleagues in Latin America and India, and also the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia when they implemented e-invoicing. And a couple of things really come to mind, which I wanted to share with you, right? First is regarding, project ownership. As I've said before, I think one of the key things I've learned is, don't underestimate the complexity. We need to really involve the right stakeholders from the very beginning. Like, I can't do what Adrian does. He can't do what I do on the tech side, but together, it's a very powerful combination, right? So really just make sure you get the right stakeholders and identify who is the project owner early. It doesn't matter whether it's tax or IT or finance who owns the data. Somebody needs to be responsible for it and to manage the project as a whole, right? Then I think another key thing here is really around the operational model, because a lot of our clients are looking at August 1. They're saying, all right, I'm gonna work towards that deadline. And then my question is, what happens after that, right? Who's gonna run this? Who's gonna be responsible for errors when it comes out? Who's gonna fix all the data so that you can get your invoices out? So I think that's as we get closer and closer to August 1, that is kind of a question which more and more taxpayers need to think about, right? Next is really, kind of your strategy. Are you going to do it in-house or are you going to outsource it? Again, as I mentioned, pros and cons for each. But I think the important thing is upfront planning, right? As said before. I think when it comes to tools, and this is something I really want to emphasize, functionality is very important, right? Because at the end of the day, if you look at e-invoicing as a transmission issue, and you define it very narrowly as a transmission issue, getting data from point A to point B and back again, then what are you going to do when you operate it and you have questions on reconciliation, right? Did whatever that is sent over to the IRB and what the IRB has, does it match with what's in my financial system? How do I reconcile the two? And kind of reports, dashboards, you really want to think about your day one operational model and then functionality in the tool. Because from a user perspective, if you don't tell IT and they define it too narrowly, then when it comes to you managing the whole process, you might find out that the tool lacks a few functionalities that you might need later on, right? And I've said before, one of the key things here is clarity on business processes and issues. The technology or IT function cannot implement a tool if you still are not sure about business processes and an impact of invoicing on them, right? The other thing is on timing. I know time is extremely short, but it doesn't mean that we do not allow time for testing and implementation. That's probably the most important aspect to this. We only have, I would say, 5 months left, and really we need to be very clear about mapping out kind of the timelines and things we need to achieve on on certain dates. I've also talked about data, right? People think a lot about implementation of the solution, but if you don't have the right data and the data needs to be transformed or you can't integrate it with the systems and things need to move manually from one system to another, then it's another issue. So it's something you need to really think about. And after that, how do you maintain your master data and it's not just for invoicing, but for your organization as a whole, right? How do you continue to improve and get better data? And lastly, it's about kind of invoicing is about getting the right data to the IRB, but then you need to understand where's the data and also how many systems you need to connect, right? So that's kind of another key issue. So I just tried to kind of summarize a few key points for you to think about in terms of your technology approach. And maybe for now, what I'll do now is turn it over to Derek Derek will talk a little bit about our tool. That's the only tool we have to show you, unfortunately, but think about, kind of functionality and what you need moving forward from e-invoicing. And when we come back, if we have some time, Adrian and I and Derek will be happy to answer a few questions. Derek, maybe over to you.
Thank you, Julian. Okay, morning everyone. My name is Derek. So what I will do now is I will just bring you through a little bit to give you a little bit understanding of our global tax e-invoicing solution, which is our middleware solution to help you to connect between your system and the IRB system to send the validated data to the tax authority for validation, and then send back those data to your source system, right? So our solution is known as a global tax e-invoicing solution. Why do we say it's a global solution? Because this tool is actually developed by our EY India team, right? So because it is so successfully used in India, whereby they have about 2 billion over e-invoices that have been transacted in India and KSA. So we have decided to also use this tax solution to be implemented in Malaysia for the e-invoicing compliance, right? So our global tax e-invoicing tool is actually hosted on a cloud-hosted base and is system agnostic. What do I mean by system agnostic is it can actually connect to your multiple source system, if you have any, or billing system, to try to extract the necessary information as per the current IRB guideline. Right, and how we are doing this in Malaysia is we are not like doing it like any normal software provider, whereby we give you the software and then you integrate it, you use it, and then we give you the user manual, then you look at it and then you figure it out how to use it yourself. So we have used a different approach. We have for using our GTES tool, we will be providing like an e-invoicing tax compliance service to you, right? So what do I mean by that is post go live, there will be our team here that will be continuously together with you in your e-invoicing journey, so that if there's any e-invoicing matters that arises post go live, we will be here to support you all the way, right? Of course, when we say we will be here to support you all the way is we will help you to identify what could be the potential errors if there's any, and then discuss with you, and then you would then need to go back to maybe your own system integrator or your own business unit to try to rectify the errors, so that that can be eliminated, and then to resubmit to the tax authority for validation, right? So like I say, our tool is successfully used globally. We have 2,003 plus clients and over 2 billion e-invoices that have been processed by our GTES tool, right? So it's a proven tool. We are not just saying that this is it. It's proven. It's India in KSA, and also this tool is being developed for other countries as well that are going to implement e-invoicing soon. Like it has been used in Italy. Going to be used in France, Poland, and of course in Malaysia as well currently, right? So how we are looking at this is this tool is actually is what we say is designed from a tax perspective in mind, right? We wanted to make sure that this is predominantly driven from a tax perspective, because like as you all aware, e-invoicing currently in Malaysia is driven by our IRB, our Lembaga Hasil Dalam Negeri Negara. So I think then we know that most of the things that will come out is really predominantly from a tax perspective, right? So in future, this tool can also be used to actually help you to prepare your tax return process automatically, right? Why I say that is because we will be this tool will be collecting a lot of data on your behalf to be sent to the tax authority. And currently, I think we have about 55 data fields. We won't be discounting the possibility that we will be having more than 55 data fields in the future. To put into context, I think in Mexico, we are looking at 300-400 data fields. In KSA, it's about 200 200 plus data fields. So I think we also have to be prepared that, more data fields will be required by the tax authority. And because we have all this data available in our our GTES solution, we can actually use this data in the future to help you populate a tax return. Right. So the other thing that we are looking at for this GTES tool is also, we will try to formulate and tailor this tool to try to suit to your need, including, integration to your various ERP and billing environments, right? And then the next thing is because it's hosted on a cloud server, it's meant to be non-disruptive. So if let's say there are any changes to the tax authorities guideline, or they are looking at enhancing additional data fields, our GTES tool will cater for all this. You don't need to worry about that. We will ensure that our tool is in compliance with all the latest IRB guidelines, so that you could be in compliance with the e-invoicing, the e-invoicing compliance in Malaysia, right? But to caveat, of course, when we say that we won't be touching your source system or disrupting your source system, but in the event due to the changes in the IRB requirement and data field enhancement, you may still need to configure your source system to ensure that you have all the necessary data fields available for our GTES tool to actually pull and extract the information over. Right. And the other thing that our GTES tool, when our EY India team actually developed this GTES tool that time, is because we are an accounting firm, and actually we know that how important it is in terms of the data security and to our client, right? So when we developed this that time, we have developed it, the GTES tool, which is in compliance with the leading international standards on information security, right? And the other thing that we have done is in order to ensure that it's a tight security for any of your users that want access to GTES, they have to use the company laptop and accessing via the company VPN before they can actually access to our GTES tool, right? And we also can restrict the user access based on the criteria that you have set out. As in, certain users can maybe only access certain companies' information, or certain transaction that can look at that they can look at only, right? And the other key functionality of this GTES tool that I would like to highlight is our GTES tool actually has this pre-validation check, right? So I think we are the only provider that actually have this pre-validation check at the moment. So what do I mean by a pre-validation check is when we receive the output data from your source system, before we send to the IRB for validation, our GTES tool will actually run a pre-validation check to detect whether there is any potential errors or not, right? So when these errors are detected, we will then send back the error report to you, and then for you to rectify those errors before resubmitting the output file to us for us to send to the tax authority for validation, right? To me, this is a very important function, because we want to minimize as much error as we can before we send to the tax authority. Because if let's say you are not able to send a validated, you are not able to receive back a validated e-invoice from the tax authority, this could potentially disrupt your business process, because you are now not able to send a validated e-invoice to your customer for them to make payment, right? So, we wanted to do this because we wanted to make sure that as much as we can, we would want to send data that has no error to the tax authority, right? But and then the next thing is also, in future, depending on the involvement of our e-invoicing digital journey in Malaysia, we are also looking at doing, with all the data that, or the mountain of information that we have, we will also be looking at maybe developing real-time analytics, so that you know that, based on the data that we have received, or maybe based on the data that the tax authority have received now, and they are sending queries to your site, then we know from which direction that the tax authorities are looking at certain some of the queries that they have sent to you, right? So I mean, to reiterate, as part of a compliance service post go live, I mean, in future, if let's say the tax authority send you any queries, we can assist you to have a first look at the queries and then give you some ideas for maybe on what direction the tax authorities are coming from. For example, if we look at the queries, it could be transfer pricing related queries. We can highlight to you, and then you can go and engage with your transfer pricing advisor to see how to respond to the tax authority queries. Right. So and in future as well, I think we can't discount the possibility that GST may make a comeback in the future. We do have our own VAT tool as well. So if let's say in the future our client is also using other EY tools, we can look at integrating all these tools so that it is just a seamless one tool that you'll be using for your own tax purposes. Right. So this is the key functionalities for our global tax e-invoicing tool. So next slide, please. Yep. So this is just a high-level overview of our global tax architecture and process. So if you can see, what we will do is if you have your own, system on the left-hand side diagram, you can then send the output file to us. And if let's say, for discussion's sake, you are not able to send the output file in the required format by the tax authority, within our GTES tool, actually we have this transformation layer as well, whereby we can help you to transform your original source data into the required format that is required by the tax authority, right? So for example, if let's say in your current system, your date format is month, year, day, and the tax authority is looking at day, month, year, we will help you to transform it into the required format. And then, you don't need to change any of your format into your source system. You just send the output file to us as is, and then we will do the necessary transformation. And then after that, we will do all the necessary pre-check. Then we will categorize whether this particular transaction, is an e-invoice, a credit note, or debit note, or refund note. And then we will convert it into the IRB required format currently, which is XML and JSON. And then it will be sent to the tax authority for validation, right? So after the tax authority has validated in real time, it will be pushed back to our GTES solution, and then our GTES solution via a reverse feed mechanism will push back all these validated e-invoice details and error reports to your source system as well, right? So you will have one single source of truth. Everything will be pushed back to your source system. Right. So this is a general overview of what we can do. Next slide. Okay, so this is just another option. If let's say you are predominantly using an SAP system, what we can also do is to help you to develop a data extraction tool within your SAP system. So what we will do is we will build a staging table, a cockpit within your SAP system to help you to extract all the necessary data from your SAP module, like your sales and distribution, FA, MM module, so that you will see it within your SAP system, right? So we will have that cockpit dashboard and everything will be done within the SAP system. The extraction will be done within the SAP system. Once that is done, the data will be extracted and the output file will be just sent to our GTES solution for us to do again the pre-checks, do the necessary drafting on the type of documents, and then we will send it to the tax authority for validation. And after that, once we receive back all the validated data from the tax authority, again, we will just push it back to your SAP system so that you will have just a one cockpit view of all the validated e-invoicing data. Right. So this we can also help you to build the data extraction if you are using Oracle and Microsoft. Right. So this is one of the additional service that we can do for you as well. Okay, so I will now move on just to give you an overview of how our global tax e-invoicing solution looks like at the moment. To put into context, currently the presentation is being done based on a mock-up tool. It's still not a live production tool yet. I mean, because the SDK was just released about 2 weeks ago, just before Chinese New Year. So our development team is currently now looking at the SDK to connect to, to ensure that we can now build our engine to be live, so that our client can actually start, or we can start onboarding our client using this GTES tool, right? So I will share my screen. Okay, I hope everyone can see my screen. So this is the first page that you will see when you access to our GTES tool, right? So I will click on sign in. Like I say, we have developed this tool to be used in a few countries already. So now we will look at Malaysia, the mock-up tool that we have developed for Malaysia. So this is the first landing page that you will see. So we have developed a sort of like a dashboard to show you, what are some of the information or things that we have received from you or that we have sent to the tax authority, right? So if you look at the first point, e-invoice error by EY. So this is the dashboard that we will show, whereby just now I mentioned that we have a pre-validation check. So if there are any errors that we have detected when we receive your output file before we send to the tax authority, it will be shown here, right? So then there is also another dashboard on the e-invoice error by the tax authority, right? So you will be asking me, Derek, so I thought just now you mentioned that there is a pre-validation check. Why will there still be error coming from the tax authority, right? So GTES may not be able to validate some of the data fields that have been requested by the tax authorities. For example, tax identification number, right? Your TIN number, which is one of a mandatory field that has been required by the tax authority, right? So only the tax authority has the master file of the TIN number belongs to which taxpayer, right? So when let's say you onboard a customer, your customer may sort of provide you with a wrong TIN number, which you may not be aware of. So using that TIN number, of course, when we do the validation, the TIN number actually fit per what the IRB requirement wants in terms of their structure or the data format, but we won't be able to validate whether this TIN number belongs to this taxpayer, right? So of course, when we send this to the tax authority, if the tax authority detected that this TIN number does not belong to this taxpayer, they could be sending back an error report, right, to us. And of course, then we will need to rectify this error, right? So there are some things that we cannot validate, but of course, we will try to validate or do the pre-check on as much data field as we can to minimize the errors that we can, our GTES tool can validate based on the existing requirement and guideline, right? So the second one is our total e-invoice not sent to the tax authority. So depending on, the integration method, that we will be, of course, when we connect to the tax authority, it will be a direct integration method. So when you send the file to us, I think there are certain clients who may not want to send it directly to the tax authority first because they want to do further check on the data that have been sent to us for processing. So we do cater for this eventuality whereby the client would want to check first, and once they have checked, we actually have a manual submit button that you can click on then to submit this e-invoice to the tax authority for validation, right? And also we also have a total e-invoice processed by the IRB shown here, and then the e-invoice type, whether it's invoice, credit note, debit note, or refund note. Right, and then they are also, based on the transaction, there may be a certain categories that you need to tag on the transactions that you have made with your customer. For example, donation, e-commerce, interest and financing expenses. So we can also build like a pie graph to show you all this classification as well. Right. So data import, this is just to show you how we actually receive the output file from you. Of course, if let's say you are doing a direct API integration with us, with our GTES tool, we will just receive this output file seamlessly from your source system, and then we do the necessary validation, and we will just send it back. Send it to the tax authority, and we receive back the validation. We will just push it back via the same connection to your source system, right? We cater for direct API, we cater for secure file transfer protocol, and also in the event that you need a manual transmission or manual transmission to us, we can also do a web upload, right? So we can cater for these three type of integration, and then you can see based on the the dashboard here, if let's say this is a direct API, 2 invoices has been received and 2 invoices have been processed by the tax authority, and in the next one 30 and 30, right? So just now I was talking about our data transformation capability, whereby if let's say you do not want to change any of your source data into the IRB required format, we can help you to do the data transformation. Of course, if let's say it's again a direct API connection, all this will be done at the backend system. You don't need to go to our system to click on all these things and do the what you call the data transformation yourself, right? So, but of course, if let's say in the event you can only do a web upload, so what you need to do is drag your output file here, and then click on what is the data mapping solution or the data transformation that needs to be done. Once you click on it again, then the backend of our system will do all the necessary transformation for you, right? So you can see here, this transformation is using a data mapping 2 transformation mapping 1, and then you can see all the status of the e-invoices that have been sent to tax authority, successfully processed by EY, and for this one, there is one error that has been detected, and we will send back the error report for you then to do all the necessary rectification. Okay. So the next step is actually showing you the individual line by line e-invoice that you have sent to us for processing. So you can view all the e-invoices here. So like just now I mentioned, we do have the capability to let you check first the data that you have sent to us before you want to submit. For this particular line, it has not been submitted to the tax authority yet. So once you have checked and verified that it is correct, then you can click on this button to send to the tax authority, right? So there's another function that I wanted to show you is like this particular third line. This particular line, this e-invoice has been rejected. I think, for mock-up purposes here, we have shown it has been rejected. So you can go to the end here and then click on this button and then see what is the rejection reason. So I think like what Dr. Rashida was mentioning just now, there's a 72-hour window period for both, for your customer to actually request for a rejection of the e-invoice. So we will then also create this particular functionality within our GTES tool. Right. Of course, currently, I think like what I say, the data that is being sent to the tax authority is via XML and JSON format, which is a machine readable format. We do, cater for what you call having a human readable format of the e-invoicing what you call format. Let me just download it. Okay, so if you can see here, we do cater to help you to generate a PDF version of the validated e-invoice, right? So this is just a visual representation of the validated e-invoice that we have received back from the tax authority. So you can shown here, the key difference now with a validated e-invoice is you need to embed a QR code in your invoice to be sent to your customer, so that when the customer receives this validated e-invoice, they can actually scan on this QR code for them to make sure that this invoice has been validated by the tax authority, right? Okay, so now I go back to here. The next tab that I want to show you is inward invoices, right? So this inward invoices is actually your AP side, whereby you are also customer and your supplier will also issue validated e-invoice to you, right? So we have also created a functionality whereby we can help you to extract the AP invoices that have been submitted by your vendor to the tax authority portal, for you to do the reconciliation if necessary, right? So your vendors may also be submitting their validated e-invoice to you via PDF, and then when you want to make the payment that time, you may want to compare against what has been recorded in the tax authority portal, so that you know that this validated e-invoice that you have received from your customer is the validated e-invoice that has been sent to the tax authority for validation. So you can download manually if you want, or we can also create a function whereby we can automatically download the data from the tax authority website based on, I mean, a schedule that you are comfortable with, right? So then the next thing is IRB digital certificate. So before we send the validated e-invoice to the tax authority, we need to attach a digital signature based on the digital certificate that has been prescribed by the tax authority, right? So this is just to validate that you are the actual sender, or the sender that has been authenticated to actually send this validated data to the tax authority. So why we created this tab is because all these digital certificate, there could be an expiry to it, and if it's expired, you are not able to attach this digital signature to the file that you are going to send to the tax authority. So then it will then again create a complication again and disrupt your business process now, right? So what we are doing here is based on the digital token that you have, we will send a reminder to you if, let's say, the digital token is about to expire, so that you can then do the necessary action to reactivate the token or to renew the token, so that it doesn't disrupt your process of or sending the validated e-invoice to the tax authority for processing, right? So then, of course, we also have this report whereby you can download all the necessary reports that you want. And we have created this tab so that you know that if, let's say, in the event someone went into the GTES, they have downloaded certain report, you have an audit trail of who has downloaded the report, right? Of course, if, let's say, the connection to us is via a direct API, everything is seamless, the report can also be generated and sent back to you seamlessly into yours for you to view from your source system. Okay, so this is a quick overview of our EY Global Tax e-invoicing solution for now. I mean, because like I say, because of the SDK that has been released, our developer is actually working around the clock to try to make sure that this tool will be ready as soon as possible for us to onboard our client. I mean, to do the necessary onboarding and of course to do the testing before the actual go live on 1st August 2024. Okay, thank you, everyone. Okay, so I think just a quick one on this. I mean, these are also some of the additional services that we can offer from our GTES tool. I mean, a PDF invoice customization, transmission. I mean, in future, I think maybe some of you already know about this PEPO. I think Malaysia, our MDEC authority is also looking at this PEPO transmission as well. So our GTES 2 is actually PEPO compliant. So in the event, if let's say in the future you decide to be on the PEPO network, our GTES 2 is able to support you. We are also looking at doing a recon function. This is in our pipeline. I mean, and this one, the QR code validator, I think this is a very important function that we are also in our pipeline to develop as well, right? So, I mean, what I just want to say here is, I mean, they are things that we can do to customize to suit based on your needs. And of course, I mean, we can discuss further with you, I mean, depending on your needs on what you want us to customize for you, right?
And Adrian as well, don't forget Adrian. I think we have a bit of time, and I know Adrian's been very busy answering all the questions in the Q&A chat, but if there are any more questions, we're happy to answer them, or feel free to continue to put your questions in the Q&A box.
Yeah, I think sorry, Derek, I was actually paying attention to you, so it's not I was just busy typing the Q&A answers. I mean, I'll just get to the questions, right? I think the key point really is this, right? And maybe I'll just take this on, and Derek or Julian, you can add on, right? The API portion, right? Or what does the client or company needs to do for their commercial invoice, right? I think there's a couple of questions here. So I think if you read through the SDK document, when you submit the information to LHDN, and if it's successful, right? And again, Derek talked about all the pre-checks, assuming all the pre-checks successful and so forth, you make API call, LHDN will return to you the QR code. Now, based on the guideline, right, the intent really is that as a buyer, if I wanted to validate if the submission to LHDN was done successfully, I can, right? And therefore, LHDN will return a QR code that links back to the submitted document, right? So LHDN is not an intermediary that will generate a commercial invoice that you can take to bill your clients, right? That's where GTES comes in, or that's where third-party provider comes in, right? So I think point number one, LHDN will not generate a commercial invoice. Point number two, not all 55 fields has to be embedded within your invoice, right? Because I think, Julian, when we talk to our clients, that's one of their concerns, right? My invoice is so full. Yeah, do I put a third page? Do I put a fourth page? Do I find a small real estate to embed the QR code, right? So the guidelines was very explicit, and the intent really is, again, for the buyer, if they choose to do so, that they can log into LHDN to validate that the numbers or the submission was successful, right? I think that was one of the key questions as I was just going through it, right? There's also a question about timing or importation of goods. I don't know, Derek or Julian, you want to take that? Because again, we do have clients that talk about the 72 hours window, pro forma invoices, sending it across. So again, LHDN is not, LHDN does not prescribe a solution, because again, it really depends on your own company business process. And I know Julian and Derek, you guys have more experience in this area than I have.
So this one is quite a hot topic. It's basically the fact that for the self-billing, the trigger is on importation, right, when customs clears it. The problem with that is sometimes the supplier invoice from overseas comes after that fact. So you have kind of a timing gap, and the data and information, when you clear customs, you have the K1 form, if not mistaken, and then you have the supply invoice that's coming much later, may not be exactly the same for various reasons, right? Because of the timing difference. So I think, and you may not have all the data even at that point in time. So this is it's an issue. I don't think we have an answer to that right now, but something we will kind of fix eventually. Hopefully the guidelines will come up with an answer that is acceptable to most parties. The difficulty here is, I would say, right, you're trying to have guidelines to accommodate so many different types of business transactions and industries and kind of taxpayers. It's almost impossible to capture every single one. But the main thing is keep the points and comments and all that coming, and we're able to kind of reach out to IRB and come up with an acceptable solution. So I think that's kind of how we see it right now. I think the other point, if I can very quickly comment, is really on the integration of the data, right? Whatever tool you're using, the data needs to be integrated back to your source system. I think that's where it should stay. Also, if you note in the recent Finance Act, all the record keeping requirements from e-invoicing lie with you. So that's another thing to kind of think about, right? How do you reintegrate it back? How do you store it and access it, when you need to? I think that's all the time we have. So maybe I will turn it over to Chao Yang. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Julian.
Oh, my bad. Sorry.
No worries. Thank you so much, Julian, Adrian, and also Derek. Now for our final session, I am pleased to introduce Mr. Wong Chao Yang, Partner, Business Tax Services at EY, who will be presenting on the topic of common tax and finance issues to consider in relation to e-invoicing. Over to you, Mr. Wong.
Good morning, everyone. Today, I'm just going to spend the next 15 or 20 minutes or so just to look at some of the common tax and finance issue, where I think everyone on this call, taxpayers who are preparing for e-invoicing, will encounter. I will present one slide, and I think this one slide sort of encapsulates some of the issues we're talking about. Can I have the next slide, please? Thank you very much. Maybe before I start talking about this slide, maybe just to address or just to carry on the conversation previously on the question of the self-billing for imported goods and services for that matter. I think that the question of the timing of issuing of e-invoices, in that particular case, I mean, as you all may or may not be aware, the IRB issued in the latest updated specific guidelines. It said that for imported goods, the timing of the e-invoice would be on customs clearance. But the Inland Revenue has acknowledged some of the issues that are brought forward by the taxpayers. They've taken note of these things, and they have articulated that they will look into the issues and come up with, maybe alternative or enhanced rules, if you like, to facilitate taxpayers to issue e-invoices in that regard. So I'll just put that aside for the time being. Coming back to the slide. So as you can see in the topic of the slide at the top, it says, this slide sort of looks at the multiple issues that organizations will face when they look at e-invoicing across multiple functions and segments of the business, right? And like I said, this slide sort of encapsulates some of these issues, but it's certainly not non-exhaustive, right? But it provides sort of a framework or a structural approach to think about some of these things. And I'll run through that shortly. So if I look at the slide, the first item on the top of the screen here, it says sales, and to its right, it talks about procurement. So if you look at sales and procurement, really is looking at the operations of a company. So if you look at, let's say, the cash flow statement of an organization, you have a cash flow from operations. Sales and procurement sort of looks at both, right? So within sales, obviously, when we talk about issuing of e-invoices for sales of goods and services to customers, everybody will, that's intuitive, right? What is not so intuitive is the idea of procurement, whereby you have to do self-billing, which we sort of touched upon for imported goods and services. So just touching on sales, as we look at the operations of the company, you have B2B transactions, you may have B2C transactions, and the way you do e-invoicing will be different because for B2C, there are certain different rules where you are able to perhaps consolidate invoices where the customers do not require an e-invoice, for example. So these are the things that organizations need to go through depending on the nature of your business. And you need to find, touch points for the customers, maybe to request electronic invoices from you if you're doing it, let's say, on a B2C basis. The other thing to sort of take note of, obviously, is that where your customers are foreign versus local, the treatment may be different as well, because the data points that go in will be different. The specific guidelines have provided certain, I think, ease of collection of information for individual customers, for example. So we need to be aware of some of these things. And certainly one of the things that organizations need to be to take into account is this whole new concept of credit note e-invoices, debit note e-invoices, and refund e-invoices, as the case may be. And these are new things that organizations need to grapple with. And some of the things that companies will need to think about, obviously, and I'm sure a lot of you already have, is the information that you need to collect during your onboarding process for the purposes of fulfilling the fields that are required in an e-invoice. So a lot of the questions we get is, there are privacy, personal data protection issues perhaps in asking this information from the customer. What if the customer doesn't want to give? I think some of these things will be resolved over time, in the sense that maybe number one, those clients that require an e-invoice in the future, they will need the e-invoice to be accurate and complete in order to claim a tax deduction. So they will need to give you that information. I think the other interesting thing to note on is that if you look at the changes to the law under Section 82C of the Act, of the Income Tax Act, which was introduced in the recent Finance Act, Section 82C, subsection 11 of the Act has a very interesting provision, which not everybody may be aware of, which talks about that any information that is collected or processed for electronic invoices and that is transmitted to the Director General of the Inland Revenue, those information that are issued or transmitted to the DG will not, the PDPA will not apply to that information, right? So there is that particular provision of the Act, which I believe all your legal colleagues within the organization will certainly need to take a look at. Okay, just very quickly carrying on. On the procurement side, so we've sort of touched on the sales side in the sense that these are, there are a lot of issues that you need to obviously look at. But if you look at it from a structured way of dealing with your transactions to make sure nothing is, no stones are left unturned, you would, consider next the area of procurement, obviously, as part of your cash flow from operations, perhaps. In procurement, what is unique, like has been articulated before, is obviously this need to do self-billing, right, for imported goods and imported services. So we talked about the timing of self-billings. Like I said, the Inland Revenue has included in the latest specific guidelines on the timing of issuing the self-billing. But like I said, the Inland Revenue has acknowledged that the challenges faced by taxpayers has been communicated to the Inland Revenue, and they will they have promised to come back and to try and align it with ease of doing business for corporates. All right. The next thing, obviously, we will look at, aside from sales and procurement of your normal goods and services, is investing activities. So if you look down, like I said, in a cash flow statement, you've got your cash flow from operations, you have cash flow from investing activities, and then at the bottom, you have cash flow from financing activities, right? So investing activities, what are the things that we normally have to look at? So on the one hand, if we have local versus foreign investments, what do we need to do, right? Do we have to issue electronic invoices when we receive money for investments, something that we sell to a local or even a foreign buyer, right? So for local buyer, so in principle, an electronic invoice will need to be issued if you are selling an investment, let's say, and you would certainly need to issue that invoice, and it goes through the IRB's workflow. For foreign investments, likewise, if you're selling a foreign investment, you would receive money from the sale of investment, and you would need to issue an electronic invoice. But the question obviously is, because your foreign, the people who are paying you from overseas, if they don't require an electronic invoice to claim a tax deduction for Malaysian purposes, then the question is whether we can consolidate all of this and do maybe a monthly or even a yearly consolidated invoice. That's something to take into account. Of course, then we have the question of when we acquire investments, right? Local investments, let's say. So when we acquire local investments, we pay somebody for those investments, and that person whom we are paying to should be issuing an electronic invoice to us. What if we are acquiring an overseas investment? That's where the self-billing issue comes in, and we have to think about that, right? So when investing activities, you have dividend income and other forms of investment income coming from overseas. Where you have those flows of income from overseas, what you need to do, you obviously have to issue electronic invoices in relation to that. And the it's a type of investments that we may need to think about or think around is, what if your investments are in relation to debt securities overseas? What if you buy exchange traded funds overseas? OTC derivatives, unit trust overseas? How do you deal with all these different types of investments in terms of e-invoicing? These are things that we definitely need to look into. Like I said, I mean, this particular slide just sort of gives a structured approach to think about some of these issues that crop up, but certainly it's not meant to provide all the answers. It's a starting point to, like I said, a framework to look around. So the next thing in relation to e-invoicing that we need to look at as well, of course, is financing activities. Financing activities where a company issues debt securities or equity instruments in raising capital. Then the question is, how does e-invoicing relate to that, right? So if you pay interest, for example, in relation to debt securities that are issued, before the latest specific guideline was issued, there was this question of who would be issuing the electronic invoice. Now, if we look at the specific guidelines that have been recently issued, right before Chinese New Year, you will note that the IRB has stated in the self-billing part of the specific guidelines that the responsibility to issue, or rather the payer of the interest, right, is allowed to issue an electronic invoice, a self-bill for the interest paid. So some of these things are the things that we have to think about, right? And the idea is to make sure that we take into account all transactions and all activities within the organization in order to make sure that there are no stones unturned, right? So just very quickly, a recap on the right-hand side, when starting from the top, sales and procurement. You can imagine or look upon it as your income from your operations. Then you have your investing activities, your financing activities, and then we come to some of the other things that traditionally we have not, traditionally that companies do, but you may not have issued invoices in the past. For example, intercompany transactions, right? So intercompany transactions, I would imagine a lot of group of companies, you would issue normal, memos or CN, DNs, whatever it may be, for intercompany transactions. But going forward, where there is an intercompany transaction that gives rise to an income from one side and expense to the other, that will entail you having to issue an electronic invoice. Okay. The other thing that we obviously need to think about is this concept of reimbursement versus disbursements. Understanding what the rules are in relation to that and making sure that we do that correctly, because you would not want to issue an electronic invoice where you are not required to or not needed to. Then there are other things like intercompany loans and so on, where we have to think about what the e-invoicing implications are. Just very quickly, running through the left side of this particular slide, under others on the bottom left-hand corner, it sort of indicated some of the legal things that we have to think about. Again, we talked about the information to be collected from your customers to issue an electronic invoice. Like I said, there is this provision in the Income Tax Act now that talks about information that is collected will not violate the PDPA Act, something to look at. And also maybe companies need to look at the contracts with the customers in relation to the collection of some of this information. Then there's a change management part, right, which is important because there's communication with the customers, right? From a B2C perspective, how do you communicate to your customers in the future to allow them to to request for electronic invoices? So these are the things that need to be looked at. And the change management is not just for your external parties. Change management is also maybe within the organization itself, stakeholders within the organization, to make sure that everybody understands what is required in relation to invoicing in his or her functions within the organization going forward. So just very quickly touching on some of the other things to think about, for example, other income or expenses, government grants, right? So then the question is, for government grants, if you receive government grants, do you need to issue an e-invoice, right? Because the government will not need to request for an electronic invoice to claim a tax deduction. So maybe you don't need to issue an electronic invoice. But if you don't need to issue the electronic invoice to the government, then you may need to consolidate it. So these are things to think around. Insurance claims, right? How do you deal with that? Obviously, this all gets encapsulated in this concept of what is consolidated and what is self-billed and so on. And just finally, just to wrap up, obviously one of the things that is an important part of the organization, certainly, is the human resource side of things, right? We have, the HR team is always part of this discussion on e-invoicing, right? Like we always say, e-invoicing cuts through the entire different functions of the organization, and therefore the project requires involvement by all stakeholders, whether it's our sales, your AR side, procurement, your AP side, people who do investing activities, your people who do raise capital, and the HR, right? Because you have certain rules which need to be adhered to for your employees in relation to the claiming of expenses in the future. So your employees need to know what to do in the future in relation to requesting for electronic invoices from maybe outside merchants that they buy things from, which they then claim back from the company. So there are certain rules that are presented in the specific guidelines. These things we have to take note of. Same thing with employment perquisites and benefits. And of course, the interesting part is, charges made to employees, right? In the past, where you may charge your employees for a lost access card or something like that, right? How do we deal with these things going forward in terms of e-invoicing? In principle, you will need to issue an electronic invoice in relation to that. So some of these things we have to think about. And like I said, and it's been articulated many times before. So this e-invoicing project involves all stakeholders across the organization, and everybody should be brought together to be aligned in what needs to be done, and to make sure that all transactions that are undertaken by any organization is looked at, to make sure that we don't leave any stones unturned, right? So I think I've basically come to the end of my session right on time. I think going forward, if anybody has any questions, you can always feel free to reach out to us. I hope this has been helpful. With that, I would like to turn this back, give this back to Ashraf. Thank you very much, Ashraf.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wong. Ladies and gentlemen, now as we come to the summary, I would like to invite Mr. Amarjit Singh, EY ASEAN Tax Leader, to close this session and summarize the key points discussed.
Thank you, everyone. And, firstly, thank you again to MChem, BMCC, and the Inter-Review Board for giving EY this opportunity to share our thoughts in respect of the e-invoicing program. I think a couple of points. I'm sure by now everybody would have, realized that this is not a one standard answer. There are many different stakeholders that we need to manage. It's not just purely a tax play, neither it is purely a technology play. It's to me, my personal view, it's a whole firm view. So, as promised at the start, there's a little bit of offer from, I think, EY that we want to put forward. So on the 7th of March, we would like to offer to the audience for this seminar to perhaps join us. You can choose either one session, and we'll send the details later, what we call a wave space session. So you could join us in the morning session, which is from 9 a.m. to about 12:30, or you could join us in the afternoon session, which is which will start at about 2 to about 4:30. So a 2.5-hour session, limited in numbers. We can, for each session, we can only probably cater to about 10 companies. Each company to bring in 2, if not 3 of their reps, one from IT, one from finance, and one from tax. And here, what we would do is dig in deeper into the question of technology, the options available, what works, what does not work, sharing with you the experiences that we've had from some of the other jurisdictions. And we will have in person our colleague from India, Priya, who has been helping the companies in India in their respective e-invoicing implementation. And in fact, now in India, it's been running for 4 or 5 years. So if you're interested, we will just do a simple first come, first serve basis. Separately for MChem members, I am in discussion with Shoban. We will probably do a separate one for MChem members, but this is open, first come, first serve. So with that, thank you once again for staying with us till the end. I really hope you found the session useful. And, if you've got any questions, feel free to reach out to any one of the, firstly, of course, to your respective chambers, BMCC or MChem, or if you want to have any session with us in terms of questions, happy to also address that. So with that, thank you. Have a pleasant day ahead. Back to you, Ashraf. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Amarjit, Mr. Wong, Dr. Rashida, Mr. Adrian, Mr. Julian, and Mr. Derek for the interactive and informative session. With that, we have come to the end of our webinar. Thank you everyone for being with us today. We hope this has been a fruitful session on behalf of the BMCC and MChem. we would like to extend our appreciation to EY for partnering with us to deliver this webinar. And don't forget to share your feedback via the link in the chat box. Thank you, everyone. Take care and stay safe.